Just wait for a couple of minutes and then see if others are joining, and then we can start. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, doubts, you're welcome to share.
Uh, I had a doubt regarding the course.
Go ahead, Niharika.
Actually, I just completed the last part, which is the section 2. And I have been taking a couple of courses which help you enhance your communicative language skills, how to teach language skills for so many, in so many methods, in so many ways. But none of them actually tells you which age requires what learning. I mean, I usually most of the time become flummoxed to understand what a grade 9 student is expected to have in terms of LSRW, the level, what a college graduate is supposed to have. So that level, how should I put it? Because that's very concurrent with the kind of materials that I'm going to bring in while teaching. Can you help me, or can you point me in a direction?
So one thing that we will have to understand is that language learning is very different from the way that we think about, say, a subject competency like mathematics and Hindi, or science or anything, because there it is about a cognitive level. For instance, you cannot introduce fractions at a young age because the child cognitively has to be able to differentiate. For instance, it is very clearly exhibited that the child has to be able to jump up on their balls of their feet, and that is linked to the amount of what fractions and they can be looking at. So if a 4-year-old generally will not be physically also developed to understand it. Similarly, the musical scales that the child is able to do, your alap for kind of thing is actually a fraction. So until and unless the child actually learns how fractions are, will actually not be able to do all the beats and the tay and lay of the music. So these are kinds of things that are scientifically proven, but that's not the same case with language. Anytime, anyone, anywhere can start learning to one extent. And the idea is then, how do I introduce it? So what do I do with it? The only important aspect that you come across in language, and in English language teaching overall, you will especially see this across English as second language, is that they will talk about three different aspects. I mean, they actually talk about many aspects, but three primary aspects. One is motivation. What is your motivation to learn? The other is, what is your, in addition to motivation, what is your attitude towards that learning? So you may be highly motivated to learn English, but your attitude is, oh, this is a foreign language, it is not my culture brushed ho jayega, but I will get better economic benefits. So I have high motivation, but my attitude has a certain conflict in not looking at the language very positively. And I'm speaking about the fact that we come across these kinds of learners and their society as well. And the third is that what is their kind of, what kind of learning, and when you say learning style, it's not learning style per se, but what is their kind of interest and what is their kind of ability in terms of cognitively being able to transform across languages. And it is generally assumed by many people that the older you are, it is easier for you to learn language, because in other subjects, generally the older you are, it should take you less time to learn the concept. That's not true, because of course, we see children who pick up languages very fluently, and generally, and this is something that I have as a small question for everyone, you can use Google for this, but how many words does a 1-year-old child pick up in a year?
About 1,000.
Year-old child.
About 1,500.
Yes. So if you go on any other thing, you will find that they actually learn across around 1,000 words. By the time they are, 5 or 6, they actually would have learned about 7,000-8,000 words. They would have come across these words, and then you're looking at the facts. So that's a lot of vocabulary, and it's not just vocabulary. Why is it that when we are teaching about name, place, animal, thing, why is it that we focus on nouns? Why do language games, so many of our language games, focus on nouns? memory game ho, or you have a name plays animal thing, or we talk about Scrabble and Hangman and all of it, and many of these really focus on these concepts of common nouns, common words, common aspects. So why do they do that? Nouns are more frequently used. Not really, no, I mean, it is not necessary.
Basically, nouns are building, it's the foundation. Every sentence has to have nouns.
Like everything
No, I can just say
has
sit,
noun.
and that is a sentence, and that will be a verb, and just a verb in it. But nouns are primarily a way of conceptualizing. If, for instance, many of you will know Hindi, and we all conceptualized. I mean, if I ask you for the name of for flower in Hindi, come on, we all were tortured through that Suman, Pushp, Anjali, all kinds of things, right? And these were not even the names of the different flowers. It was not like it was a rose and a jasmine, or you had the Gende ka Fool, which was different, but you also had to learn Pushpa and Suman, and of course it was Pushpanjali, but not Sumananjali, and all kinds of nonsense, and we had to learn all of it. But the fact that when you were learning, can I use Fool everywhere? Can I use Suman everywhere? Can I use Pushp everywhere? When you really look into it, it was nuancing it for you. So for instance, Russians actually know a lot of colors. They have a wide range of names for blue. What that does is it conditions your mind to being able to recognize the concepts. And that's something else that works through. So the conditioning of the mind through certain kinds of concepts that are there. For instance, when you're looking through, how do I recognize relationships? Everyone is an uncle and an aunt, but not in India, right? In India, you have like umpteen relationships laid out. Not just in India, but a lot of Asian cultures have very specific names and terminologies, and they're basically always conceptualizing it. So if you're talking about the way that nouns are, and this is also in GRE exams, these are also other concepts that are tested in even adult exams, and now, of course, GRE has gone back. It doesn't test you so much on those list of words that you had to by heart and then show off. But many competitive exams look at nouns because it is a conceptual error. It is basically, if I know a word, I don't just know the word. I know the concept behind the word. I am able to now understand, categorize, and recategorize concepts. And I'm able to understand the relationship that I may have with that concept. And therefore, nouns become very important entities to understand and learn. What about adjectives and adverbs, which are also important, and we all have fun. But adverbs and adjectives are not just about the fact of, they are about how we describe. They are our perspective of how an action is taking place, or how a particular person or a thing is. And they are perspectives that we can invent more easily sometimes than a noun. So you will find that a lot of people, I mean, we have all heard fantabulous and stupendo fantabulous and all of these in the dance shows, or you have, your frigalicious.
Anusha, I think you have froze. You are frozen. Anusha, we are unable to hear you.
Ma'am, we missed a part actually.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes,
we missed a bit.
Sorry. Yeah, so I was just saying that this is a beautiful part of branding as well. So for instance, when Apple came up with its concept, none of the Apple products are really known as, they are not a laptop. No, hello, I need to be a Mac. It's a MacBook. It's not a tab. I mean, tell any Apple owner that, oh, is that a tab? And they look at you and say, I have an iPad. And it is a very distinct, it's basically a tab. It's not, it can't just be anything for them, right? Like they have these very simple, it's an iPhone, it's not just any phone, apparently. So but it was a very clever way of strategically branding yourself as being a distinct, separate element that you are. And that is what naming does. Brands understand it, marketing understands it, that when I name it very consciously as different, I also am in a way giving you a concept which is very unique. And to that extent, when you own that concept, you are feeling, oh, this is the concept that I need to be engaged with. Now, why did I start with these questions to answer Niharika's question as to where is the strategy coming from? The point in a lot of these reasons, and I was asking you how many words does a child learn in a day, is that is the grasp that a child has. So let's take up this very simple exercise that you may do. If I ask you to say no, as in no, and can you figure out where your tongue is in the mouth? No, as in no. I actually do this in class with my MA students for linguistic and stylistic analysis. It's super fun in person where everyone will just have to say these words, but we may have static, so I won't do this. But if I ask you to say lo, as in low, yes, thank you, Uma. Upper front, near the just above the upper teeth and that alveolar ridge, that is a ridge there. And lo, as in low. Again, where is your tongue? Again, there, right? And so, as in so.
With tongue in between teeth and air being pushed out.
Yeah, but if you're really looking, a child is never trained and taught to say where to place the tongue at l or n. And again, in Indian cultures and many of the other types, you have no, 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 no. You have l, r, 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 you have r, 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 r. Right? All of these
the
are
classic one is l, l, r, l, l, r. Yeah, you move your tongue to the front, l, then l is in the middle, which is there in Marathi also. Then you have r, which is clearly a Tamil and Malayalam kind of, which you take your tongue at the back of your throat.
Yeah, your velar region, kind of. You just roll your tongue.
You can try that. It's a classic, nice, funny and entertaining exercise.
It is a hugely entertaining. But a child is able to learn all of this without being told that this is where you place your tongue. It will, of course, make mistakes in all those fricatives of l and sh and so when it starts speaking. But over a period of time, all of us, what child? I mean, all of us were children who all learned this. We trialed and errored and we figured out, oh, this is how I have to say it because it doesn't sound right. And they do it by the age of 1 and 2. There's a lot of critical thinking going on in their head. They know how to position the tongue. It's so difficult. And now when I have in MA, when I have students are like, this is so difficult, phonetics is so difficult, phonology is all this. And I was like, but you learned to practically do this when you were 2 years old. Now that you're 22, you have a problem naming the point, and why would you have that as a difficulty? These are questions that we, of course, keep asking. And if you understand this concept of language learning, this part of language learning, that children are able to assimilate a lot of language and they're able to produce it very efficiently, then you know that it is not a problem of language that I have to address in the classroom. What I have to address in the classroom is what is the kind of critical thinking that a child has? What is the level of cultural sensitivity that a child has? What is it that I'm doing in the classroom? What is my purpose of a classroom? You can talk to children, and this is the truth about many children. You will find this in many language studies, that a child who is coming from a privileged background, where they are exposed to very educated parents, and we know this for a fact, that educated parents' children pick up language skills much more easily and much before uneducated parents' children do that. Now, the question comes in as to why is that the case? And again, there are studies in urban slum areas where they have done these studies in, say, Mumbai Dharavi itself, and found that parents whose mothers are working in other people's houses, middle class houses, and they take their children to those houses, those children seem to pick up language before the children whose mothers may be stitching but are staying at home. They're still earning members, or they may be doing laborer work and being in the construction site. The question then comes, what is it that the child is developing in proximity is the fact that the child is exposed to a lot of modeling of language and therefore are able to pick up very difficult words, are able to experiment with it, are able to understand it and comprehend and speak it. But they may not know how to use it. They may not know the nuances because they've not had enough exposure. And these are questions that we have to answer. So when we were looking at, and I will, share with you, we have been talking about, Clicks English modules somewhere on and off in our course as well. And we do that because some of us, I included, are quite proud of what we have managed to achieve. But we have this thing where we are looking at these elements. We have a communicative English level 1 and we have a communicative English level 2. And the stories in level 2 were constructed by us. We wrote those stories in order to ensure that we had a notional understanding of what is it that the child has to learn. So it was a very task-based method. We used David Noonan's style and strategy, and we used Prabhu's task-based learning methodology and looked at the function notional syllabus and then created something of that sort where the children will be involved in a story and learning it, but also look at agreement, disagreement, argument, greeting each other, how will you introduce yourself and so on. So we had a very purposive storytelling session, but we had to create these stories. When we had to go to, but when we went to Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh, and we realized that the children there do not even have Akshar Gyan of Hindi, not just English. And we also were asking them, we did a lot of field trials, and we were asking them, what is it that you would like? And all of them, of course, said stories. Now this became a problem. We went to Pratham Story Weaver and we said, okay, we are not going to be creating so many stories. We have a plethora of stories that is there that is available in the open resource repository. Why reinvent the wheel was our question. And we decided that we will go and take Pratham Story Weaver stories from there. And this is what we found. We found that if I wanted simple English, then I had a simple story. And if I had complex stories, because 9th standard children can understand complexities, and I wanted complex stories, then I had complex English. But I did not have a story which was simply told, but was cognitively challenging. So there was no something like, think of a puzzle. A puzzle is very often cognitively challenging, but very simply told. And it is it charms the child. Now, it doesn't mean that a small child, a big adult, sorry, not a big adult, but anyway, yes, an adult cannot learn or enjoy children's stories. It's not that. But it is the fact that a teenager may not want to read always, for young children going fishing and reading about them. It's fun once in a while, but I also want to see where I can come in. So this is another thing that comes through in elements of storytelling that come through where you're saying, is it cognitively challenging enough? So to go back to answer your question, Niharika, we have to find what really interests the child. And this is again a question. We've done teacher trainings and there are teachers who ask us, can we show horror stories? My children are very interested in horror stories, but I don't know whether as a teacher, I can recommend horror books to this 8-year-old child. And that's a question again that is always had to answer, because sometimes there is also this kind of policing that happens at the school level where they may say, oh, we should not show horror stories, or we may not show, these other elements that come in. So those are focus areas that we may have to think about and figure out. So you're asking what strategy works for which child and which age group. That's a trial and error method. There is no shortcut. Sometimes what seems very simple is actually very interesting to someone who is old. You're so cynical in your life. Have you gone to workshops where sometimes you're made to play kids games and had a blast doing that? And then, you know, as a child, you're so enamored of something that's actually very difficult, because you like, I also want to write. So many children are very interested in folding clothes and, you know, cooking and sweating it out in the kitchen, and then also writing with a pen and all of it. And then when they have given the pen and then they're told now write, and then nothing, right? Like, it was only fun when I was like, oh, this felt like a privilege to me. It became a duty. I'm no longer interested. So I think those are elements that we will have to really grapple with. I feel as strategies, and there is no one strategy that works. It works with the student lot. We have gone to very young children and been able to talk about conflict. We have gone to very young children of even 6, 7 years of age, who have given us beautiful insights and been able to articulate quite well about labor problems, because they are coming from those kinds of communities. They're able to talk about gender biases and labor problems and challenge, the status quo. And we have also gone into those societies and found that these people are absolutely mum on certain other things that are outside of their experience or their concern, or they don't really know what to think about them, and therefore speak about them. So somewhere, when we talk about the fact that someone has to learn a language, it's not just the language that they have to learn. They have to learn to think. When we say sarcasm is the highest order of intelligence, it is because sarcasm is so difficult to get. Any film, the simple-minded person, the naive bholu person, is the guy who does not get sarcasm. So when you say shirt kaisa hai mera, and someone says ha ha bahut acha hai, ha ha ha, and then there is this very bholu type who is like, oh, usne bola shirt acha hai, and you know that this is a problem, because that person is naive. The person is not cynical enough, not simple, and their cognitive levels of understanding sarcasm are not yet there. Their cultural understanding of it is not yet there. So are we able to allow the child to be able to imagine? So when we talk about the snow, and very often we talk about the fact that, we are telling children in storybooks, we tell them, imagine snow or daffodil. And why should the child learn about daffodil when gende ke phul ke upar kyun nahi likhte? And this has now become a huge debate with textbooks revisions happening and all of it. The question is, what is it that I want to do in my textbook? And the question is, what do I want to do in my class? Storybooks are, there's a very popular saying about what storybooks are, what stories are. Stories are a mirror sometimes to us. They reflect us. We want to see us represented there. And by looking at us sometimes, we can correct ourselves. We see whether we are beautiful, we see whether we are ugly, we can adjust our dress, our makeup, our, bindi, whatever, and we can improve ourselves. But we do want to see ourselves sometimes. But stories can also act as windows to the world outside, to a world that I never may step out to. I stay cocooned in my home and I look out, like in a rainy day when I stay sipping a cup of tea and it is pouring outside and I'm like, so happy. But it's nice to see the rain. And it's fun to see it. It is good to imagine. It is something that is incomprehensible to me sometimes, but through this glimpse, I'm able to see a world that is alien to me, that I may not even want to be a part of for that time. And it can also act as a sliding door where I can immerse myself in that world and then come back to mine as I want. Very often games are called immersive, but we know that stories can be equally immersive. How many of us at some point in time were like reading that storybook, huddled under the covers, saying, no, I don't want to put this down because I don't yet want to come back to my world. It is that closet where you want to immerse yourself in this Narnia and never come out till you finish the experience of Narnia. And that is what stories can be. Now, if I have that perception and I want to get the child to imagine, I need to build in them skill sets to imagine. I need to build in them these abilities to relate. So I may talk of daffodils, the child may never have seen daffodils, and I may want the child to be able to relate the gende ka phul with the daffodil. I may want the child to be able to imagine that there's some flower somewhere else that someone else likes, which is like a rose. And I want the child to be able to imagine that maybe there are fishes flying in the sky. And maybe there is, mountains underneath the ocean, which is actually true anyway. So, and how do we know fishes don't fly in the sky? So these are questions that really is about imagination. And so we have to look at these language skills that we are building in children and try and see what is it that we want to do. So I talked about storybooks, but also in terms of thinking processes, critical thinking. We always have this concept of K+1, where the child has a particular knowledge. It is only interesting if the child has something more that he or she has to learn. Otherwise, why would I be engaged in it? I mean, it would be like playing the same video game all over again and again and again. So that is something that we would have to think about and understand. So going back to another question, if you're saying just about sentence comprehension, what kind of strategies will work with children? Actually, for language learning, it's about what interests me, right? I can be interested. If you think storytelling is interesting, then tell stories. Stories work across all age groups. They don't just work for one. If you think games are interesting, games actually work across all age groups. They don't just work for one. Bingo is a game that can be made at any level. I could make a bingo letter. I can make a bingo of things. We all are playing, many of us must be playing Wordle, no? 5 letters and just playing around with it, and we're all engaged with it. And literally, I mean, I thought we were all past the 5-letter stage, maybe in 7th standard or so, but we still are challenged by it, engaged with it, learning about it, trying to think about it. So can I think about the critical thinking level that comes in? There is an entire movement that is looking at where we say excite the child's imagination or interest in doing something, and then through that get them to learn language. What does that mean? There is a group, you can check it out, it's on ELT Footprints, is the group. It is basically for looking at environmentalism, environmental action that we take. And therefore we say that, all the English language material, everything English, I can teach English through environmentalism as an action, as a case in point. What does it mean is that I will tell and share with you stories on nature. I will show you statistics and newspaper clippings that talk about environmental damage. I will ask you to write letters that will be used for environmental activism. Write a letter to the editorial, write letters to your mayor, write letters to your district collector, write letters to your BMC person, find out who they are, do research, write a report on that. And write a description of a plant, write a autobiography of a flower that is cast aside. So everything that you do in English is working through environmentalism. And you can do this with anything. I mean, environmentalism is my pet peeve, but you can actually do this with anything that you want. So there are some who will say, this year we will do environmentalism, next year we will do, maybe conflict and gender or something like that, and we could represent some of these elements, and you work around it. So as I said, going back to your question, Niharika, I have not answered it really where you're asking, but I think it's a very important question, because people ask, what is the age group at which what should the child, how should I teach? So I answered that part of your question by saying there's no one strategy. But to answer the second part of your question, which was a very compact question, which was really dealing with how is this measured, the child measured in terms of competency, as to what levels and standards they should have. There are standards. The NCRT has laid out learning outcomes. definitely. But there are also standards that you can check internationally, which are like, so for instance, you have the CEFR standards, Common European Framework. Even the NCRT follows this. So Common European Framework Standards of English, I'll just put in CEFR for now. And this is across languages. Every country and language has adopted it for themselves. And it basically shows what are these levels look like. What are these English standard levels looking like? What are the competencies you should have? And even if you go to the dictionary, for instance, they will tell you that there are, a word is at a C1 level or a B1 or a B2 level. So there are 6 standards. A1, A2 is for beginner. C1, B1, B2 is for intermediate, and C1, C2 is for advanced or native-like learners. In Japan, they have increased the number of bands for Japanese because they felt it was not enough. So they actually have an A minus, A plus, A1, A2. Sorry, they have A minus, A1, A2. They also have a B minus, B1, B and B1, B2. In that sense, they have a B1, B2, and they have a B3 in their thing. So they have different levels that they look at. So these are the kinds of intermediates that they really talk about, and they chalk these into saying what will be the kind of exams and linkages, and what does it mean to be in terms of it as measuring for the scales, and how do I use these statements. So they give you examples of it. They tell you about it. And if you go to an Oxford dictionary, and I just want to, because the site is available and you can search for it, but if you go to an Oxford dictionary, very often the word will be told in a sense, they will tell you whether it is a C1 or a C2 or a B1 or a B2 in terms of vocabulary. So the word like guess versus predict. Guess is a lower level word and predict is like a higher level word. But you will find that many of our students, when we talk of BICS and CALC, we talk about basic interpersonal communication skills and academic language proficiency in a sense. When you are looking at the competency of academic language proficiency, children are very good at it because they learn the scientific terms first, which are supposed to be higher level, and they learn the greetings later. They don't know the regular communication. So you have words where you could talk about and say, so let me give the word that I used, yes. And so they will see here, they will give you whether it is A1 as a key. That's a level. So they ask whether that's the level that comes in the sense. And what does that mean? So you can go to a long list of words, and there are these different testing meters. So even on Word, if you are ever gone into the Word document, so this will give you, you look at, what all are in the A1 level, and you can search for all the words that come in the A1 level, whether the child has or anything. In America, they have reading test list. That's called the Felch list, and they have multiple lists. Felch is one of the people who worked on this, and that vocabulary list becomes a testing way of asking, do they know these vocabulary levels? In NCRT, when you look at the fact of how they are introducing levels in schools, simple sentences are at the beginning, compound sentences then are introduced in 3rd, 4th standard. Complex sentences are more a 4th, 5th, 6th standard thing. And it really depends from state to state. But, and if you're learning English as a second language versus if you're learning English as a first language, when complex sentences get introduced is also changing. It changes from one year to the other. So it is about how you are expected to manage the sentence formation. That is to give you a hint of what occurs if it is linguistically that you're asking what is their linguistic competence to be and how is it to be mapped to the grade level. But again, it will differ. It depends on ESL, whether it is English as a second language, English as a third language, or English as a first language. But in today's day and time, with the kind of rules that UGC is coming up with, which says that higher education institutions should allow for students to write exams in their mother tongue, if they so want to, and we are all grappling with this wonderful privilege given to the students by asking, but how many languages should a teacher know? Or, it is a question that, is the child supposed to be proficient? Again, we go back to the question of what are we assessing? So if you check out Telangana state textbooks, and that's just an example, but Telangana, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh have very nice textbooks where the question paper is not set on the textbook largely. It is set on discourses. So there is reading comprehension unseen. There is poster making, there is language, there is some grammar that is tested, but a lot of it is not on, the question paper is not like a history paper. It is not testing you on the textbook. And that is a great way of trying to understand what really works. And these are questions. So I'll go back and being sorry, I literally made this the entire session, but it's something.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I have questions. I couldn't see, kind of a hand putting up those hands. So
no,
speaking. See, the thing is that I have moved places through my life, and because just connecting with Niharika's question about how do you address language learning with different age groups. I don't know from the teacher's perspective. I haven't handled that many age groups across, up to adulthood. But as a learner of language, and may not be completely proficient, but in some I can speak, some I know to read and write and understand, but I can't speak too well, and to different degrees, having stayed in many places. But I noticed that, when we are talking about learning and different age groups, so what's the purpose? For instance, I'm a Tamilian, but I really didn't know how to read or write Tamil till I had to come here, and I was an adult by the time and was in college. And then I learned a lot while I worked, because one just came across, you had to look at documents, and then you don't know what to do. So you ask somebody, and you're familiar with some letters, then you pick up, and then you kind of construct the words, construct the sentences. You're still not proficient, but it's like this, you have a kind of word with even the vowels taken out, but you still know what that word is because you've got familiar. It's something like that. And you've heard the language at home, say, but you know a kind of a Tamil, but you don't know the Tamil that's spoken wherever you're going. You don't know the Tamil that is in the, the written Tamil. So there are so many kinds of that we are talking about. English may be less, but that's again because we are seeing it from a foreigner's perspective. But just like that, my fair lady, I mean, you have different dialects, you have different. So what is it that we are actually looking at? I mean, this has interested me terribly. And when I went to Hyderabad, I did not know Telugu at all. And I learned it by simply those days to Doordarshan. So you just watched whatever came. So you watch movies, you watch news, you pick up a lot, you learn language that way. So when we are talking about this, while a classroom or having to deal with a group doesn't allow us a flexibility of, activities or of that much, or the time to do that. And there is an outcome that we're looking for. So there's a limit, kind of a thing that boundary is already set, that you're saying there's an outcome that you're looking for. So how do we look at all this and say language is, like you'd said rightly at the beginning, Anusha, that it's not like a sequential kind of learning and you just kind of learn many things all at once. How do we look at it in a kind of a structured environment that we are talking about, like a classroom, whether it's for a child or for an adult?
So a very good question, and thanks, Uma, for that. Yes, it is the fact that there are different Niharika, you had a question.
Just to add to what Uma said, that what is the structured approach for approaching issues like this? there was a lot of discussion going on regarding textbooks, etc. Textbooks versus the usage of other materials in the classroom. Now, what happens is one of the most difficult things that the textbook doesn't do is talk about the cultural context of things, which Uma talked about, as well as it does not talk about the pronunciations. It does not. It does not help you with that because it's all visual. You can just read, you can just go ahead. How do we handle? Because most of the time we are dealing with adults, and trust me, you can make children sit and read books. You cannot make adults do that. So I was just wondering how to go ahead with this.
So that's the point. It brings me back to the point of, what interests them. Right. So, for instance, when I go to Pune, and it is also about need. So, another point that comes in is what is my need? I may not be interested. I may actually not be motivated. I don't want to learn it. And I don't like it also. But I have a need. I can't survive. I will learn. I will end up learning. So, when I go to Pune, and this happened to me when I came from Delhi to Bombay, I could go into a Bombay shop and say aloo, and they would sell me aloo. But if I went to Pune, I would point to the person and say, I want aloo 1 kilo. And not that the guy did not understand me at all, but he would never budge till I said batata 1 kilo. And if I wanted to buy batata, then I had to learn that word. So I literally looked at the person next to me saying batata and said batata, and he gave me batata. So I was like, okay, I need to learn this now because, it otherwise I'm not going to get this vegetable. Though my mother was quite glad that if I wouldn't, but I would not get any other vegetable as well. So it also is about need, which is why you see a lot of marketing people, sales people pick up languages because they can't do their job if they don't pick it up. And you're looking around and saying, what is it that makes them linguistically competent? Sometimes it's not even, it's about the fact that you think of your brain in terms of a radio frequency. If you don't listen to grunge metal, for instance, or rock performances, for instance, you look at the rock performance and you're like, there's so much noise in that. It comes from a generation which will look at it and say there's so much noise. And then if you have nothing else to listen to but that for like an hour, after a point you start figuring out all the nuances. Oh, there is guitar section, and there is a drum section, and there's actually quiet section sometimes, even in that very heavy metal music. And so that makes you more nuanced when you have to really engage with it. So that's one. So is there a need? If there is a burning need and there is this atmosphere where you're immersed in and you're pushed in, and that is where that immersion technique came in from, where in fact in Australia, they still talk about the lost generation because they just plucked them from the Aboriginals and put them in the white households and said, this is how you will learn because you won't learn with your people. That's also wrong. Immersion, we are learning more and more, is not very conducive, which is why we are saying home languages are a great scaffold for the child to learn conceptually. Learn the cognitive skills, learn the critical thinking abilities, learn the strategies that, as Uma was pointing out, and this is the difference between an adult and a child learner. An adult knows a lot of strategies you can take from your language and be able to understand कि मैं सेब खाती हूँ and I apple eat are not going to be similar. I understand much more quickly. I'm able to decipher the pattern in the language. And I understand that the subject in the Hindi will be followed by an object, and then the verb will come right at the end. I pick that up, that seems to be a kind of pattern. Whereas a child may even learn to speak it without even recognizing the pattern. It is an intuitive knowledge, but it's not a knowledge. It is more just a recognition of something, and it doesn't transform itself into knowledge. And then over a period of time, through reflection, is when they make it a knowledge in a sense. So there is a difference there. So can I activate the students, the adults' ability to pick up patterns. This is where the audiolingual method became very popular. You have picked up these books which is saying learn some language in 30 days, from Hindi to English, from Tamil to Malayalam, whatever. And you can learn it in language. What do they do in that book is basically give you patterns. This is similar to your this language and this is different from your this language. And that actually was an army method. Army had to, in America in 1900s, had to go into foreign terrains and pick up a language, and they just had to learn functionally. So everything in that method is a very functional concept. I need to learn how to go to a toilet, I need to do it. So if you go to Duolingo, even today, and you ask, the first thing that Duolingo asks you is, why do you want to learn this language? You want to learn this language in order to go as a tourist or for business, or do you generally want to learn? And then the kind of examples that they give you and the kind of things are slightly more nuanced as you go up the field. But if I'm a tourist, I just need to know certain basic concepts, right? So that's the fundamental first part. To go back to another question of yours is answering, when basic, and this is actually given in NCERT learning outcomes. If you want to go to a school level, things, they are progressively where they say that you should learn to describe first. So think about your school compositions. What was the first kind of an essay that you were given? It was narrate, and then it was describe. So you had to narrate sequences first. What did you do during your summer holidays? That was our first basic exercise, right? So we learned how to narrate in sequences. Why? Because I needed you to understand chronology, time. I needed you to understand sequences. And then we learned to describe. What would describe me? 1 hour at a railway station, sit there and be able to think about something in depth. But an argumentative essay or an analytical essay came much later. In fact, if it ever came at all. But it came much later because that is a higher level cognitive method that would take you up there. So these are the things that even in school they have understood, that you may be able to tell a story much more easily before you can, and you may then be able to describe it much more easily. And it's only then that you can analyze, because analyze does not just mean language, no, it requires a lot more. Actually, none of these only require language. And so there are different skill sets that you will be also asking them to train. To go back to your adults question, Niharika, because I think you teach adults and that's a different population altogether. A, they're very impatient. B, they are very trained in their head that in school I learned a lot of grammar, I didn't learn it well, so you should teach me grammar. So the one thing it is very useful to do is ask them, what is your purpose of learning? What do you want to do at the end of the day? Do you want to be able to tell a story? Do you want to be able to make a presentation? What is it that you want to do? And if you want to make presentations, you need to model yourself. Then you need to go to YouTube, not YouTube, but maybe TED Talks, and listen to a lot of how they present. What are the intonations? Because you can't be doing stand-up comedy always in presentations. You need to be able to watch serious presentations unfold. Now, one of the things that we can do with adult learners that generally does not always work with very young children is analyze a presentation or a video or a demographic and tell them what was the body language, how did it look. It's not that young children cannot get it at all, but there's a lot more. They don't pick up all the they don't always pick up all of it and convert it into strategies, but adults do. So what does that mean is, let me give you this as an example. Have you used Quillbot?
The AI support, Quillbot for writing.
Yes.
Yes, I have used.
So if you have used Quillbot or any of these, a very simple thing is I have quite a few students who will look at it and say, we don't know how to learn, we don't know how to, okay, my site connection seems to be off. So they will very often tell me that, we don't know how to correct our sentences. And you're like, so AI kya kar raha hai? What is AI doing? And sometimes by giving them the strategies and making it visible to them as to what are the strategies that AI is using in order to correct sentences, improve sentences, or paraphrase sentences, they are able to then, extrapolate and then use it themselves. So there is a level of extrapolation that adults have already picked up a strategy from elsewhere that they are now able to use when they are learning languages. So can I activate that for them by giving them certain sample texts, by giving them certain sample elements? So can I take a news video clip and ask them how many times the anchor has made pronunciation errors or intonation errors, and then ask them, was it really hindering communication? So many of them then overcome their fear of making mistakes. Very many adults have a fear of making mistakes, and if you show them very famous news anchors, because there is no way that there is a news anchor who has never made a mistake. And so if you show them those and you say they are getting paid lakhs to do nothing but this, and they are not even speaking on their own, they have a teleprompter and they're speaking and they still make a mistake and they still retain their job. And this is their only job. And that's what they do. They make mistakes. And so can you give yourself few more in every 60 seconds? Can you allow yourself 20 seconds of mistake? Is 40 seconds okay? Is it a success rate? And if you can convert that to them and get them to train their mind, you get them to learn more easily. I am not giving you answers, Niharika. I do realize that it's still your thinking and your element, but that comes.
Anusha, I would like to ask some question.
Yes, please go ahead,
uh,
Swapna.
I've done the previous course with you and this course also, S01a and S01b. Do you have another course related to it, so related to English? And one more question. Just can you elaborate on the implementation task? I still have to submit.
Yeah, I will definitely do
Thank
the
you.
Yes,
implementation
please do
task.
that. Thank you.
Yeah, I will. We have other courses. We have something that's called E04, which is simultaneously running, which is designing learning, designing experiences for the English language classroom. That's slightly different from here, from this, and we've tried to keep it different in that sense. It's more about the English language classroom. It's aimed more at the school children, but you can. We also have certain examples of the college classrooms, etc. It comes from these, right? This was more about how can I take materials and play with them, and what could materials be. And even the last class that we did, I was talking about the fact that materials need not be how you conceptualize them as something physical and tangible. Anything can be really made into a material. And how can learning interplay with that? There are some forthcoming courses like assessment and learning that I am interested in and seeing. And to answer some of Niharika's questions in terms of competencies, this is where that grappling comes in, where how do I evaluate competencies? Niharika, even to your question, just to very quickly answer that, and to Swapna's, it is very, so we have these courses where we talk about, for adults, functional proficiency in English, professional proficiency in English, business English. Cambridge will give you these courses called business English, and they all have a different outcome and purpose. So it's not that my adult learners are always interested in stories, for instance, or they want to read, for instance. My question is, what are they coming to? So can you do a needs analysis and understand from your students, what is it that they want to do? Do they want to speak well? So the moment you ask them to speak well and then you tell them to read, they are like, lekin reading se mera speaking improve nahi hoga. Great. So let me give you the same content as an audio video story. Can you look at video graphics or something? The second part of it is, if you think that they must read, then I need to highlight for them how reading becomes important. What is reading enabling that learner to do and build as a competency that they need to be able to have in their professional life? They don't like reading. I get it. Chetan Bhagat has done more for reading than Shashi Tharoor has actually in India. Because people are able to pick up Chetan Bhagat's
True.
whatever novels they are, but they are fun, they are easy to read. It's not boggling my mind. I don't feel like a failure, having gone through 2 pages. And that's not always the case with some of the more celebrated writers in that sense. And that is where I have to also pick up. Is it okay for them to read a graphic novel? Is it okay for them to read a comic book? Can I get them to read some small snippets? And when you read that, you also have to say, what is it that they're interested in reading? So is it financial news? Then can I get them to read something by making it about business? Can I get them to read about a business case study? So there are many books. We generally, when we talk about it, we tend to recommend a lot of storybooks, but why not nonfiction? Why not other kinds of writing and journal and magazines which they may be actually more familiar? Again, I know a lot of readers who have read Women's Era and Femina and reveled in it, and always said कि अरे वो बाकी सब stories नहीं चाहिए, वो Women's Era बहुत अच्छा है. And then you're looking at them and you're like, but stories भी पढ़ सकते हैं, can you read the other book or something? नहीं. So sometimes, if the same story had come in a digest form in Women's Era, I'm sure they would have read it, or vice versa in whatever other place. So I think somewhere we also have to figure out what is interesting to them and what is their purpose. And if not, if we feel that what materials we are giving them is the better one, then make it explicit to them as to say, why is this material better? What is the skill set? Give you one example. Many people do ask us whether we can get the same material that you have on the TISEX course as a reading print material, right? And can you just send it to us as a PDF? And we constantly say no. Now, I have a question for you. Why do we say no? This is interplay of learning and materials. Why do we say no?
Because feedback will be much later. That's one reason. Because here there's instant feedback and assessment.
They are like, हमें ठीक है, हमें चल जाएगा.
Skimming and scanning. We just scan and what is important and just leave it. And
that is so
important. Yeah.
Swapna, but that they will do on the as they are scrolling up and down and left and right.
True,
also,
true,
it is possible. So no,
Yeah.
but yeah, if someone else has because there is a conscious. Yes, Kritika.
Ma'am, is it that like we have to go advanced level after getting the insights from this course? We have to go to the next level without like going back, referring that again and again. Is that the case? I'm just guessing. Yeah.
I don't know. You can go to the advanced level from a book also. No, schools have it. Abhishek, you were trying to say something.
I was thinking there is this interaction there is this interaction thing that is there when it is in chunks, so then you pause and you think. And I think while reading, I think that ideally that should happen while reading also, but I mean, reading a PDF also, but then in this format, I think there is a level of interaction that happens, there is this discussion tabs. And so there is a moment where we pause and, try to think, okay, what needs to be done.
Adding to what Abhishek said, Abhishek continued and said, last time when I attended the Zoom with you, I reflected a lot. There are a lot of nuances which I didn't know. Plus, I'm a coordinator of a school. I could apply a lot of things which you said. Now also, when you're saying, I'm reflecting a lot what I can use in my school. Plus, what you had said, it is there in that course. How can I enhance the course? Which are the remaining sections? And it's very interactive. It makes me think a lot.
So that's the webinar part, but the PDF part is basically people saying they want webinars, for sure they want that engagement, but it is also the PDF part where it is the reading. So just to that question of Abhishek, that you won't go, if you have it in the book, then you won't go to the site at that time and do that MCQ or a select or type in the answer. And that typing in the answer is a pause, as he was talking about. It is a chunk. Generally, in a book, we have noticed that even if they give you that wonderful section that says write your notes, it's basically blank, it turns. But generally, when you give it on a site, because there is that wonderful blue tick that comes which says that you have done this, people type. Do word bhi theek hai, but they type. Now that is that much time taken to pause, to reflect, to engage, to think. It is also wonderful to immediately see others' reactions. But that's the point. We were saying that if you get the PDF, you're not going to come onto the site. If you get a Telegram group to communicate, you will not go to the discussion forum. And the discussion forum remains a very rich repository of many ideas and questions and the way others have answered your questions that is very streamlined, which is not the case in a WhatsApp group or a Telegram group. And so the conscious decisions in terms of even materials here as to interactivity, we were saying community of practice we will only set up after the course is completed, because we have tried the other way around and realized everyone answers the course answers within the group, and then others are there is that self-pacing, and you've already come across acha ye aage ye hai, so you're not really able to self-pace yourself in that sense to move to unit 2 only when you are ready to move to it, because the group has already given you certain hints of what it can be. That's the point. And so there are these conscious decisions of interplay of learning and materials. But there's also another point that especially during COVID, many teachers came back and gave, and I was giving them these as, earlier, before that, I used to tell them, no, try reading on the screen. It is a very different strategy from reading a book. Aapka pura dimag, you have to change your entire way of reading. When we read a book, even today, I remember where my heart diagram was in the textbook. I can perhaps even tell you the page number, but I know that what matter there was above and below that heart diagram. I know how it was positioned, placed, and that's my visual memory. Can you do that on your screen? You can't. Your memory has to be completely rewired in order to consume material and remember material on a screen, especially the smaller the screen it is. That means you are rewiring the way that you're reading, consuming, and retaining and reflecting on information. So when we went to an exam hall, we would close our eyes and say, "Nee, there are 2 more points I know that was at the back side, wo niche." Remember, I mean, I'm sure all of us did those exams and had that. But that's not how I can do it with my screen, where I have this wonderful scroll function. And now PDF has given me liquid mode function, which allows you to dynamically change and re-engage. That means my entire way of cognitively retaining information in a visual manner, that visuals is constantly changing depending on what screen size I have, depending on whether I was scrolling or whether I was in a liquid mode or I was in a static page, print view format or anything. It makes a difference to how you think about that information. It makes a difference to your perception of that information. And then teachers did tell me that this kind of engaging, because we were doing it in 2019 and all also, they said we were able to now understand when the students faced problems. So we'd say, humne to PDF bhej diya hai WhatsApp mein. But when they were saying that we are not able to understand and read, we could figure out why, because we struggle so hard with this on-screen elements. We realized that strategies of reading had to be taught afresh. And it has to be taught afresh. You can't take a print reading strategy to a screen reading strategy. And one screen reading strategy does not fit another screen reading strategy. The mobile phone zooming in and zooming out is like mind-boggling. So I have learned to read very tiny print to the extent that I have a lot of people criticizing me for the microscopic reading that I can do, because I want the page format, as a visual. And so I can read an entire A4 page on my mobile screen, which people just look at me and say, "You are nuts." But I want that. So I have obviously, but when I have to zoom in and zoom out, now I have to condition my mind to retain that visual image and be able to take these pieces and build them into a page. I didn't have to do that as a book. And that's the interplay of learning and materials. If I know that the student is not able to read, I also need to understand what is the material that the student is doing. Is it a big book? Is it a small book? Is it zooming in and zooming out? Can they read if it is on a 4-inch screen versus a 5-inch screen versus a laptop? All of these make a difference in interplay of learning and materials. Font size, lines, length between, the space between each line, these make a difference. for a student, especially someone with dyslexia and all of it, but even a regular student who does not have the recognized learning disabilities, it makes a difference. And so those are elements that you have to start reflecting on. And as I was asking you these questions, I'm sure more ideas came to your head about where all you could, and what all you could look at. But yeah, there are certain decisions that we said must be done. And as a language teacher, one of my pet, something that I try going back to as my research question is, how does on-screen reading differ from print reading? And there are many people who say that print reading retention is much better than on-screen reading. And I agree, even mine is much better. But I also feel that's also because my strategies for print reading are far stronger than my strategies for on-screen reading. And if we are able to build those, because we've still not seemed to have clicked those strategies for what will work for on-screen reading. On-screen reading is not even a static reading. So how do we do that? Is one of those questions that a lot of people, there's a lot of research that's happening around it. So that comes in. Just a minute. Certainly. 1 second. Gayatri. Okay, so that is something that works in the favor. Okay, so to go back to one of the very simple things that Swapna had asked, what do I do about the assignment? No, no problem. So that is, I'll just share the screen. We have left it to y'all. I did do this last time as well, saying that this is all that, there's not too much to do in the interplay of learning and materials, because we would really like you to explore interplay, and we would really like you to explore these materials to a large extent. So I'll just go back to that implementation exercise and recast it and walk us through it. So one is, you write down whatever learning objective you have. It could be for any group that you want. What is it that you want to teach them? It could be that you want them to do critical thinking. It could be that you want them to be able to use, be able to describe something. It could be that you want them to, it could be that you want them to be able to present or be just confident. Whatever that learning objective is that you are trying to achieve, what is the resource that you may want to use to achieve that learning objective? So I want them to speak. Then maybe my materials is not much about, using fancy equipment. It could be even a recorder. And there's a lot of power in students being able to hear their voices. One thing that we realized with Click's modules to that extent is when the child hears his or her voice and is able to record and is able to then hear it, they realize two things. One, where they made mistakes, we don't have to tell them because they are sensitive. And second, they also gain confidence because they suddenly feel, I'm not as bad as I sound. I mean, sometimes for the singers, I do feel they would record and hear themselves and realize how bad they are. But speakers sometimes feel, acha, itni bhi galti nahi ki. I'm not that bad. I mean, it's okay to tolerate. You can tolerate my speaking. So they gain confidence in speaking. So it could just be a recorder that they do, or it could be a game. It could be anything. So what is the material, resource, activity that you would have? So describe that in the basis of why you would use it. It could be a non-ICT material. And like last time, as I said, materials can be your people, your students, they can be your materials. So humans can be materials. It doesn't have to be an artificially created one. How will you use that? And what are the language teaching points that you're trying to achieve through that? So if as humans, following directions or instructions, for instance, and what are the principles that you used for creating it? Like, I want them to communicate. So what was it? So therefore, I wanted them to be able to have eye contact. I wanted them to communicate with each other. I wanted them to collaborate with each other, to negotiate. What is it that I was trying to get them to do? It doesn't have to be fanciful words of principles, but at least, what kind of elements did I really want when I was thinking of using this resource? Creating could also mean curating. It doesn't have to be that you invent, research topics and research thesis are largely materials that we have gained from insights from elsewhere and are collating and curating together. Literature reviews are like that. So that is a creation. Playlists are curations, but they're also creations, right? So each one of us can do that. So that's the first part. The second part is, can you use it in your classroom with around 2 students and present your experiences? And this is the most important part, because this is why we're part of reflective teaching, in a sense. What was your experience of using the material? And what was the students' engagement of using the material? Did it really help you achieve the learning task that you wanted, for this? And if there is any implementation evidence, if you don't have pictures or it doesn't make sense, you can even describe that experience. So it could even be handwritten description of the implementation. And
Anusha, sorry, there is
yeah.
no light. I would like to just explain. I have taken pictures, but those are ICSE students which I've taken from a class. I'm teaching, my school is not open, but I teach in a class. So I've taken Merchant of Venice. And we've done a lot of critical thinking about the Merchant of Venice and all the characters and all. I've done Act 2 and Act 3 together. And they've written the reflection on it and lots of things we've done.
Yeah, you can just use that. You can, you don't, you may not want to always share the students' phases, because, if they're children, especially, if you have not taken their back. So that really depends on you, your school policy and things. We also will not use these, pictures in any way, but the evidence was more like whatever is convenient and useful for you to do. So that's there. That's there, but yes, you can definitely use this, and it is just about teaching any language objective. So it could be Merchant of Venice or anything of that sort, but it could be anything else as well. So that's there.
Yeah,
so this is So this is just for us to have a reflection, and it may be that it flopped. For instance, I have gone into a class and taken these cutouts of pictures and asked students to spontaneously, be able to sustain a conversation of 1 minute each based on the picture that they get and build a story. So they had to kind of in a group be able to sustain a story for about 7 minutes, 1 minute each person. And what I realized was that it did not work in that particular class. And on probing further, I realized that the material I had chosen, the pictures I had chosen, were fine, but the printout was not. That had smudges and it was not very clear. So students did not understand what I was trying to do. And they could not really guess what the picture was about. And it didn't, and what looks sometimes very nice and descriptive and enables you to speak a lot as a color print does not always work well when the colors have bled together and it's a very flimsy paper. So I realized that I had to keep in mind the GSM quality of the paper the next time I was taking a printout, and the fact that my printer should not have bled colors at that time. So I've taken a color printout, but it was very smudged. And these are reflections that you realize, and it hadn't struck me, really it hadn't struck me, even when I saw it. It was not that bad, also because I already had an impression of these pictures, that it would have been a hindrance to them performing the activity.
So then that becomes a reflection that tells you about, or what else I have to think about materials and learning. So just sharing this as something that could be a failure and you work at it, and that's fine. We would like to learn from that as well. And I think we learn more from mistakes sometimes than we learn from all books and sages. So it's great. So yeah. You can, Yasmin, you can go about it even if you teach just about 1 or 2 people. If you just try an activity, or there may be something that you have already tried and you could reflect on it and organize it in this structure at least. That is another possibility. Is 1 of the 2 should definitely be do. Hang on.
Anusha, except the evidence, I have everything else. Okay.
Yeah. So
I
the
was
evidence does not have to be evidence. As I said, it could be a description of how that engagement was.
fine. Works for me. Although
Yeah.
I do have a screenshots, but I don't know how.
Yeah. So one of the teachers in English especially is very difficult because they were like, we were getting them to do role play. What are you going to understand if I take a picture? There's just one child sitting somewhere and standing somewhere. What will you understand if I take a picture? I said, don't tell me what it was. We want to just know how it was. So, and it's a matter of trust, right? I mean, the evidence. Okay, so I'll tell you why we have put in evidence, or I'll also tell you why we have put in evidence. It's not just for us to, it's not a question of judging you or saying we don't trust you. We often, when you have to then think about what evidence you have for this, you start reflecting on the experience of teaching much more rigorously. It's about the fact that, so how do I know this, or how did this happen? And then you suddenly start thinking more about it. So writing down or documenting that evidence is actually is a scaffold to enable you to reflect even better as to why it happened. And there are times when you go into a classroom and you're trying to collect the documentary and you're like, that student did not pay attention because they can't, that room, in that room, that corner, they can't listen to the audio properly. As you're collecting it, you suddenly realize they were too far, no? Maybe the sound didn't reach, or maybe the window was open and it didn't strike you when you were conducting that experiment or conducting that lesson. And so it sometimes is very useful. That's why we said evidence. It's not just about trust. Yes. So yes, you can do the thing with your niece, nephew, and that is it. Yes, Anisha, wonderful, because language can be taught to anyone at any age. We had one person teaching their grandmother in one of our
That's lovely.
Yeah, so they taught their grandmother, and it was fun to say, and there was a lot of rant about how there were, personal problems also that came in, and then realized how they have to communicate. And at the end said, I learned how to teach older people and what patience I have to require. And I'm going to go back to my class. She was teaching young kids and say, I think I prefer teaching them than older people. And I was like, wow, what a reflection. Yes, Shalini, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Anusha ma'am, for this wonderful session, because I think for some reason I missed the last one. I was thinking it was last Thursday only. I realized that when nobody came on that Zoom, it is this Thursday. So I already have done 2 courses from the online test courses, which is one is coaching and mentoring teachers for professional development, and the other one got the certificate for the same yesterday, which is strategies to teach literature. So
mentoring also you would have to this evening received.
Yeah, so now I'm doing this one because unit 1 had a lot of brilliant techniques on how to make fluency better, accuracy better, and all of that. And unit 2, even I had the same questions like one of my fellow members asked on implementation. I'm yet to do that one. I think the last day is on Monday, 22nd. The thing is, you were talking about 2 more courses. One is, actually I had a dilemma which one to take. Designing and making learning experiences with reference to language. Should I take that one or this one? So I read all the, elements of both the courses, and for some reason I thought I would take up this, maybe that I would take up later. But you were talking about one very interesting course, which is assessment and learning. So I have one question, which is, I'm also looking at something which is to do with education management, education administration, and also how language can be developed and grown in teachers as well as in students as well as in teachers. Anything that this offers on that note, I would be very helpful for me to take up, because I do a lot of language coaching.
So yes to that, we will be offering, we don't currently offer, but education leadership management, yes, we do have something. Assessment and learning is something that I will be developing. It's not yet out completely. It is the earliest that I can think of releasing it is only in December. So that seems like a long time away for some learners, but for me, it's like, oh God, I have to do this in 6 months. So
anyways, we keep getting messages, like,
yeah, we do. So we will have these courses. Yes. So yes, there has been a lot of required demand for assessment as well. So yes, to both of your questions in that way. Yes, Archana, please go ahead and have your questions. Yeah, the others don't have any specific, course related questions, then if that could be preceded, and then the others can be. Yes, you will be, Niharika, to stay connected. So my answer was the first, my typing was for Rasika, but Niharika, yes, we will be staying connected. We will send you a mail very quickly with the links to the community of practice groups that we have on Telegram largely. But yes, we can stay connected. Telegram also, because it helps us to be, it protects everyone from their phone numbers being displayed. So
I have one question.
Archana. Yeah, Archana.
Yeah, I have one question, ma'am. Some portions didn't graded right now.
Yes, they are not graded right now, because I will, the course instructor Shreyasi and I will be looking at them, and then I'll finish grading and we'll get back.
Yeah, okay, ma'am. Again, this the implementation about assignment, the pictures or the something else. What is the concept of evidence or
concept of evidence can be even handwritten. Aapne likh diya ki you write out what you just did. That is, and how the students reacted. That also can be evidence. It doesn't have to be always pictures. In a language classroom, sometimes it is not, right? So you can even describe. For instance, let me give you an instance. It doesn't have to be the whole description of every single thing that you did. It could be. It could be, for instance, I'll give you one example. You said something as an instruction, you gave an instruction, and so fill in the blank. This is, one of my assessment pet peeves is fill in the blank as an instruction. What does this question mean? Every single exam, if any one of us has been supervisors, we've all had this wonderful question come back to us. Miss, do we write the full sentence or do we only write the word? Do we write, when we write the word, do we underline the word? Or is it part of the sentence? We've all done this, no? I mean, as students, we did this to our teachers. As teachers, we constantly have students asking us. And there is no one right answer. There are some teachers who will say, just write the blank answer and leave it. There are some who are like, no, full sentence should be written. The word should be written, underlined and answered. Only then you get marks. So when you put that as an instruction and the student has asked you, Miss, what should I do? Should I write the full sentence? Even that could be evidence. Just that conversation can be evidence. And then you could talk about an entire, a paragraph on how it got you to reflect on how we give instructions and how you should change the way you instruct. I gave this as one example, but it will really depend on your lesson. Does that help answer your question, Archana?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, all right. And we will have more sessions. We also have something like School Synergy, where some of us come and deliver lectures, but we also have very interesting people across the country who sometimes come in and share their teaching practices. So we will share that link also with you all. We keep doing other stuff. So definitely we will be in touch, but and also through the course. But we will put out these. there are more questions, we are welcome to ask, and we are happy to stay on. The others who are, how important is pen and paper writing in the prison? I have a colleague who thinks that we should throw away all the devices and only write with a pen and paper and get people to read books and underline it and all.
I have some parents fighting that it's anyway going to become obsolete, and why should they? How does it matter if they are not writing well on paper? But I explain that, ultimately, even if typing on document, the child has to structure their thought and write correctly, So whether you're typing or writing, but then pen and paper, yeah,
So the
like you said.
question is basically one of the questions. The way to answer this question is, I have found a better way to answer this question is to ask them. So the calculator does all the calculations. Why should they learn mathematics? No parent is asking that question. So then you're like, because there is a kind of mental process that, yes, the calculator will do the formula for you. And yes, the calculator will, give you the correct things. But what is the mental process of me figuring out that 4 plus 2 is 6? And what is the mental process of me going from my finger of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or hold up 2 fingers and say 5, 6. And then from there, moving to a mental thing. There is a brain that is using all of these strategies and problems to be able to move it. If you're able to get that, and mathematics they get, because no one is questioning that.
So thank you for the concise answer that I can give to people.
Yeah, so you could try this because it seems to work much better with them.
Yeah, definitely.
And it is true. No, there is no unit 3, Reshma. There is only unit 2. We have released everything. So the course is about to almost end. We would get definitely.
Mine is over.
Yes, yes. Yes, we will assess. Yes, I haven't started. Definitely. So that will help. All right. Yes,
is it possible to access the first session that you had? Or
Yes, we will. I think the recording is already available. We will just embed it. I think we'll get that done if it is not already. We haven't sent out a mail, I think, on that. Yes, you will be able to access the recordings, and you'll be able to access this course even after the course.
This course I understand, but this is B, the earlier one. I understand that is A. It's archived, but would we get all the materials? I mean, is it possible for us to access? As
No,
those who have not been part of that?
Yeah, it is a paid course, so no, it is not.
Okay.
But yeah, that
but
is
in
not.
This one, the one we are doing right now, for this, once it's archived, we'll have that list of resources available.
Right? All of it is this course will be available to you for years. All the resources. The only thing that is missing is the interactivity, where you can't change your answer or something of that sort. So even if you lose your certificate, because the certificate is digital, even if you lose the certificate, you can still print it out again as a refreshed, in a sense. So that is available to you. That's the idea of the MOOC, is that it should be digitally available for a longer time. So you can go back, check all your answers, check the discussions. In mentoring, especially, a lot of feedback that we keep getting is, the discussions were very rich. In one of this course also, there were the discussions here also. Some of y'all have given this very wide range of what materials to use or where I go to for materials, that sometimes you're so overwhelmed for now, you may want to go back to it after, a month or so, and then check out whether you will really explore some of these resources. There are some good ones that, you all have shared amongst. So yes. All right. For today, you have stayed on for a longer time. Thank you very much. And we'll call it a night for now. And wish you all the very best. And for those who have not finished, we do look forward to your assessment, to your assignment, and to learning from you. It doesn't have to be very long. It is more about, have you answered those points and being able to look at it. Yeah, I think it should not be. We've tried to keep this particular course. I mean, if you really look, the ones who have done from S01A will tell you that this course is way lighter than the other one. Also because this was developed after that, and we got feedback about how long that was. So we kept learning. It was also about allowing you all time to explore materials. So thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Anusha. It was really
Thank you,
great interacting
Anusha.
with
Thank
you.
you, Shreyasi.
Yes,
Thank you.
Tracy has
Thank you,
been a
Anusha.
stalwart.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Have a nice
Thank
day.
you.
Bye.
You
Have a
too.
nice day.
Bye.
Bye.